I have talked about this when people complain about echo chambers online. I understand they're talking about social media, and I do think there's a problem with that. And I've advocated that everyone out there set some bookmarks so you have a left site and a right site and a left site and a right site. So right away I'll check CNN before I check Fox News. I'll check Huffington Post before I go to whatever it is. It could be Bright, but whatever the sites are. And then I also have on my phone sort of a radio package where I listen to CNN, Fox News, and then I listen to NPR and BBC. Now, a lot of people believe that NPR is unbiased, as one would think of government-funded media. Yeah. When I think of federally funded media, I think of media beholden to no one.
I think when the viewer falls asleep behind the wheel, they, or the listener, I should say, the listener, sorry, they should hope for rumble strips.
And please wait for the break to kill yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Please wait.
Hope it's quick.
Please go ahead.
You'll find a noose at your nearest exit.
Yes. Take.
Or a lesbian creek at the truck stop. So,
chug glass of pills.
It's an island in
That's their entire
and
show.
now we leave you with a wonderful cut of Stephen Colbert's Moderna or Pfizer. Okay, so NPR had a massive inconsistency in real time. I was listening to it, so what you are about to listen to, and I just want to see if you got, this is what bothers me, is the lies by omission. People ask me, why don't you often address Rachel Maddow? Well, look, we know where she lines up. I don't have a problem with someone being biased and being open about it. I have a problem with someone claiming to be objective journalism or claiming that their network is objective journalism, that they are an objective journalist while lobbying for federal funding. Okay? They're not funded by viewers like you. That's a lie. CNN right now AG announces strategy to combat domestic extremism.
What happens when your chief, the person who's behind all of the disinformation that's driving some of this domestic terrorism threat is the President of the United States? That's one of the issues that was...
are they admitting that he's the former Vice President of the United States?
Exactly, right. Well, no, this is a setup, right? So they're saying that white supremacy is the worst domestic threat that we have to deal with, and then they're saying that domestic terrorism is a big deal that we have to worry about right now.
Right.
And what they said, they listed out several kind of things that they were going to focus on, and one of those was finding people that are pushing this. And so they're going to use this as a pretext to come after you if you have a bad opinion of what
keep in mind that we've all been accused of white supremacy just in calling it the Wuhan virus.
Right.
So this is what happens when you say white supremacy is what? It's right-wing extremism. What's right-wing extremism? The entire Trump wing of the Republican Party.
Right.
What's that? The Republican Party. Therefore, all Republicans, and by proxy conservatives, are domestic terrorists.
Yeah.
Your Honor?
Does it make more? Yeah. Does it make more sense to you now? Do you understand why they will not move off of any topic that has to do with anything else? They won't cover it. They'll cover white supremacism. That's the problem. That's the issue that we have to deal with. If there's a mass shooting somewhere, they're going to cover it all day long with white if the shooter is white. Otherwise, they move on from it. San Jose, Colorado, both of those happened, right? And they moved on from it. Georgia, same thing happened there. It was the same story because they're pushing a narrative, and anything that counters that, they don't want to hear it.
Right. And I think, do we have the clip there?
Yeah, I think we'll bring it over.
Okay. So this actually works perfectly. It fits in with what I just listened to on NPR. Speaking of, right, they want you to believe that white supremacy is the main threat. And you might actually believe it if you watch CNN or listen to NPR. Listen to the way they describe...
Or if you're an idiot.
These, yes.
Yeah, that too.
But it's a drip, 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 like a Chinese water torture or a CNN hour, where they want you to only hear one side, but it's framed really, it's framed in a way that sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
It's framed in a way that sounds level-headed. I've always said this, I don't care if you're passionate, I don't care if you're a little bit spicy, I just want you to be honest, not just honest about the story, honest about where you are coming from. One rule that I have, for example, we reached out to H3H3 to have a conversation. Even if we have people on the show who I disagree with, I make sure they know ahead of time that there might be a grilling.
Yeah.
I make sure they know ahead of time where I line up because I hate when journalists just lie. We all have a point of view. Be honest about it. It's sort of like when you would have guys, when we were in grappling tournaments, they'd have a black belt and they'd go and they'd toss on a blue belt.
Yeah.
Because they just wanted to collect medals. Well, that's what a bully does. They just want to collect trophies, but they're absolutely meaningless. And of course, we know that the left speaks from a bully pulpit right now. So what they want you to do is only hear about the crimes at the hands of white people, which statistically are far less significant, let's be honest, in this country. If you're going to be the victim of a violent crime in this country, if you're white, black, or Asian, it's far more likely to happen in the hands of a black American. That's just reality.
Well, I gotta say, when I was getting out of my stagecoach today, some Irish hooligans took my pocket watch.
So here is NPR describing two different incidents, and I want you to see if you can spot how they address race.
A woman was killed in Minneapolis last night after a man drove his vehicle at high speed into a crowd of demonstrators. As Matt Sepik of Minnesota Public Radio reports, protesters detained the alleged attacker until police arrived.
The demonstrators blocked Lake Street in the city's uptown area to protest the killing of Winston Smith. Sheriff's deputies on a U.S. Marshals Service task force fatally shot the 32-year-old black man June 3rd while trying to arrest him on a firearms warrant. Local activist DJ Hooker says a driver accelerated through barricades and hit several parked cars, one of which struck and killed a woman sitting on the curb.
A car came at us going like 70 or 80 miles an hour, and as it got through the first street, it even sped up as it got to the car, and it hit the car.
Video that Hooker took at the scene shows protesters detaining the apparent driver, a white man, and handing him over to police. For NPR News, I'm Matt Sepik in Minneapolis.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington. Officials in Austin, Texas say a man has died of his injuries following a mass shooting downtown early Saturday morning. The shooting left more than a dozen people injured. At least one suspect has been arrested. Austin police say they think the shooting began as a dispute between two parties. The incident occurred along Austin's 6th Street, a popular nightlife destination. A winning bidder is set to join Jeff Bezos.
Now we move on to the next story. So the first story, victim, a black man. Perpetrator, a white man. Whoa, what happened with Austin? What happened in Austin?
Yeah.
That was a mass shooting. That was a pretty big deal in Texas.
Yes, it was.
No mention of race? Well, I'll let you know as to why. The Austin American Statesman, one of the premier papers, refused to publish a description of the suspect, writing, "The American Statesman is not including the description as it is too vague at this time to be useful in identifying the shooter." And such,
Really?
and here's the thing, it is too vague,
Really?
but then they sort of tip their head and say, and such publication could be harmful in perpetuating stereotypes. What stereotype? He said it was vague. It was nothingness, and, the black community doesn't need this right now.
Mumble mouth.
You can find it was a black man with long hair, and this matters because it should keep people safer, okay?
It was a long hair, a hippie.
No, I mean, it should be the same across the board. If you're going to say that a white guy did this or a black guy...
Well, they noted it before. Black victim, white guy. And then they're like, we have to cover the mass shooting, but how are we going to do it? It's going to erase our prior good deed. I hope you'll forgive me, Clarence. Let's just move on. Now, we don't want to not perpetuating stereotypes. And what happens is then people go out and say, every time there's a mass shooter, it's a white guy.
Right.
Well, yeah, because if there's any other kind of mass shooter, which statistically is not a white guy, you don't report it. You say that it'll perpetuate negative stereotypes.
And right up until you know the motive for sure, you're hinting. If it's a white shooter, you're hinting white supremacy the entire time. But when a guy walks into a theater and says, Allahu Akbar, you're like, well, we really don't know.
We don't know.
It's mental illness. That's what it is.
At all.
We have no idea that is prescribed specifically in his own holy book and the only guaranteed way to go to heaven.
Back to you, Bob.
Oh, yes. In other news, terrorist goes to heaven. But I think with this is, once you're taking it to a point where you won't identify a suspect that's at large, you're like, I don't know how to say this. He's very musical. Is that
urban? Is the word?
If confronted, he'd maybe be able to run faster and jump higher than you.
He could rhyme to a beat.
Right.
Watch Louder with Crowder live Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern.